When we think about securing our environment, we often think that it's really complicated. We hear things like there was a sophisticated cyber attack that took down a large organization. The reality is, securing your environment doesn't have to be complicated. Of course, there are sophisticated attacks, but 9 times out of 10, when you hear about that, it's something really simple. There was an open port, somebody was allowing untrusted software, somebody opened a remote access tool and allowed the attacker on the network. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how you can really take simple steps to secure your environment. And we'll start with going back to early 2000s. Early 2000s, I was working in corporate IT, and malware was day to day common. We had an antivirus, we'd still get malware. But when we did get malware, it was things like the I Love You virus or the Blaster virus. And it was really an IT issue that only affected IT people. And even back in the early 2000s, antivirus, anti malware didn't detect everything. Today, malware is obviously a lot more serious. Quite often, a cyber attack starts with a reverse shell, somebody giving you malware that maybe is going to get detected, but also may not get detected by your antivirus. So, what can we do to actually stop these attacks? Because we know we can't detect everything that's bad in the world. Essentially, the first thing I want to talk about is simple things that you can do right now that will reduce the probability of a cyber attack. I'm going to start with blocking outbound network traffic on your server. And I'll give you two examples of this. In 2019 to 2020, there was an attack on SolarWinds ORI. And essentially, it was a backdoor implanted into the SolarWinds software. So when you push the software out, it would reach out to a command and control center 3 weeks later, and it would get instruction on what to do. Now, the reality is, it doesn't matter how well prepared you are, whether you reviewed SOC reports, there's very little you could do to actually stop that backdoor being on your system. And it could happen with any software you run. But simply by blocking outbound internet access on your server, whether you did that through something like ring fencing, which I'm going to show you now, or whether you did that by just putting a block rule on your firewall, would actually stop that attack being able to reach out to the command and control center. Another similar example is the Exchange vulnerability. There was a vulnerability, I think, in 2022, allowed attackers to point to your Exchange server. When they pointed to it, essentially they could run remote code that allowed them to download software onto your server. And I saw one case where they pushed out ransomware through group policy to an entire organization. Again, simple, blocking outbound connections on the network would have foiled this attack from actually being effective. And this is really where we need to think about cybersecurity. We want to think about simple things we can do, controls we can put in place that will actually stop attackers being able to execute code. And when they do execute code, limiting what they can do. So I'm going to show you a couple of things in ThreatLocker and how you can do this. And again, these things don't necessarily have to be done in ThreatLocker, but they're very simple things you can do when we're thinking about security. So here, I'm going to go into my portal here, and I'm going to show you the first and most important thing you can do that you're probably not doing today is block untrusted software. If a cyber attack starts in your environment, it's going to start one of two ways. It's going to be an open port on your network, or it's going to be software that's ran in your environment. Now, that could be malware, known or unknown malware, or it could be something like TeamViewer or remote access software that somebody just tricked a user into running. So the first thing you should do is block untrusted software. Now, that's not as difficult as people think. Essentially, the way you work is you deploy an agent. When you deploy that agent, it's going to go into a learning mode. During the learning period, it's actually going to track everything that's happening on your machine. It's going to log all DLLs, all executions, all network traffic. It's going to show you who signed the software, what process called it, and all of the details you'd like to see in an audit. So here, for example, I can see DLL host has launched. You can see whether it's a verified Windows file. You can see everything that's going on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn from that. And we're actually going to start to build out a list of applications you've run. And we do that in two passes. One is we try and figure out everything that you run that we know about. And that's tens of thousands of applications. And you'll see that by this little ThreatLocker icon. And if there's a check mark next to it, it means we're actually going to track updates on that. So any new versions are going to be automatically allowed as well. The second thing we're going to do is look for software we don't know. And we're going to create custom definitions and learn that automatically in your environment. Maybe we find a program in your program files folder called custom app 123. We'll say, hey, we found this program. It's called custom app. We really don't know what it does, but we've created a policy for you while it's in that learning mode. We're going to show you additional information like what country it was developed in and potential risks with the software. People often think good software, bad software. Not really. Quite often it's the intent in which the software is being used. So we'll show you this is file management software. It can be used to compress files. It can also be used to encrypt files and is quite often used in ransomware attacks. And we can see here where it was made as well. It was made in Russia. We can see which policies are on your machine. So we see this is permitted for the entire organization. And we can also change those policies if we want to deny it. We have the ability to filter because we want to make sure that we don't have remote access tools we don't know about in our environment. So we can filter by things like categories. So I'll take remote access software, for example, or remote management software. I can see I've got none in my environment. That's good. And I'll even filter by things like browser extensions. So if I say browser extensions, what extensions do we have? And it will show us again what the extension has access to. So in this case, it has access to my passwords, it has access to web data, and it has access to the internet. It's a coupon clipper. We can see information. It's a coupon clipper. It's made in China, and it can see our passwords. This allows us to say, do we want this software in our environment? Bear in mind, all software in your environment can see all the files you can see as a logged in user. So it learns all this for you. It shows you the risks. And then essentially, once you've gone through a learning period, you can just lock it down. And if you're not comfortable before you lock down, you can do a simulation. So you can say, hey, I want to simulate any denies that might have happened. If there is something, you can create policies in advance. But once I'm happy, I switch this to secured mode and no untrusted software can run. So that's one thing that you can do that's going to make a huge difference to your security. The second thing you can do is control network traffic. So I'm not a big fan of statistics, but last year or 2 years ago, Microsoft released a report saying 70% of ransomware attacks involved remote encryption. Now, remote encryption is where somebody doesn't necessarily get onto one of your devices, but gets onto your network or maybe is on a home network. And what they'll do is they'll use an unprotected device, they'll connect to a network share, or maybe they get on your network and they can't run software, so they build a virtual machine and then connect to machines from there, and they'll encrypt files remotely, either by connecting to a C dollar, an admin dollar, or just one of your file shares. Now, the problem is with remote encryption is it's really, really hard to stop because you can't see what software is running on that remote machine. You have to open the network shares for some machines, and that causes life to be difficult. So the second thing I would suggest is for the machines that don't act as a file server, for machines that you don't need to access through C dollar share, admin dollar shares, or just general shares, create a network policy. You can do this on any firewall. You can do this in ThreatLocker and create a network policy to just block all inbound traffic, or at least block that RPC traffic. And what that means is if someone gets on your network, tries to connect to your machine and encrypt files, it's not going to be able to do it. Tries to connect to your machine and steal files, they're not going to be able to see it. Now, for file servers, it's a little bit more difficult because the way firewalls work is they block based or allow based on IP addresses. And if you've got a dynamic IP address range using DHCP, we're not going to be able to say block based on IP addresses because you don't know what the user's IP address is. So what you can do is you can create a dynamic policy, though, to allow the Active Directory ports, allow the RPC ports, but only allow them from permitted devices. And you see this option here basically connects back to the source machine and ensures it's running. Now, that is probably the second most important thing you can do. And I'm going to start with a third, which is limit what applications can do. Now, we saw this big list of applications in our environment, and in my very clean test environment here, I have 45. The reality is most of you are going to see about 500. And that could be something like Microsoft Office, Google Chrome, Firefox. But it could also be that little webcam support app in the bottom right corner of your screen, or you've got things like PowerShell or CScript or RegServe. And PowerShell can be used a lot of ways, and we'll see attackers use it to exfil data, encrypt files, cause system damage. So we want to be able to control what the applications can do. So rather than trying to say, I'm going to detect a not abnormal behavior or behavior that's considered potentially malicious, we're going to say what we'll do is we'll actually configure PowerShell so it can't actually see more than it needs to see. And this is really, really simple. I just check this box and say, I don't want PowerShell to talk to any of these applications like Internet Explorer or BitLocker. I don't want PowerShell to see any of my files, because why would PowerShell need to see my network shares, my documents? If it does, I can make exceptions. And if I'm not sure what it needs to see, I can hit this auto-populate button. And I don't want it to go out to the internet except sites that I'm actually scripting on the internet. And just by doing this, we can stop things like Red Rabbit. We can stop things like data exfiltration using PowerShell. Very, very simple. Not going to upset your user because PowerShell doesn't need to do these. Now, this applies to every application you run. So we'll take that 7-zip as an example. Now, maybe you need 7-zip in your environment and you're just a little bit concerned it's going to be used for encryption. You could actually go into here and say, I'm going to change this. So one is 7-zip has no business reason to go out to the internet. So I'm going to permit it with ring fencing instead of permitting it. I don't think it needs to talk to any other applications. I don't think it needs to see any of the internet. And I don't I don't think it needs to see any of my files. So I can make that exception. If I say, well, you know what, I actually need to zip up 7-zip files with it, or open 7-zip files, I can just add that exception in there and it will be able to do that without any problem. And just by ring fencing these applications, it means if the application steps out of its lane, it's going to hit a brick wall. And that's how it really stops things like SolarWinds Orion. And you see vulnerabilities in applications just by limiting what they can do. It really stops a wall. And if it's not hard to do, you just hit this auto populate and it'll show you what it's doing in your environment. Now, the reality is that's 3 examples of things that you probably should be doing that you may not be doing. The next thing is there are so many small things you can do in your environment to really harden it. Take macros in Microsoft Office. Most people don't use macros. If you just block macros from running in your environment, disable in an office, that's going to stop attackers from being able to launch PowerShell from Office. And you can do that through ring fencing as well, or just download malicious code. Doesn't cost you anything. It's very easy to do. You can do it through group policy. You can do it through any of your software management tools, or you can do it through ThreatLocker as well. Now, one of the things we added into ThreatLocker is something called defense against configuration. The reality is there's 2 ways to stop malware. You block it because it's known malware, or you block software by default. And it's better to block software by default. There's 2 ways to stop PowerShell stepping out of its lane. You have an EDR or a tool that detects anomalies, and then you automatically stop it from, you alert or kill the process if it does that. The problem is you're responding after something bad happened. The other way is ring fence it so it can only do what it needs to do. And if it does any more, it just simply gets blocked 0 day. Now, what we're going to do in ThreatLocker here is we're actually going to show you potential configuration issues you have in your environment. So we talked about ring fencing, MSHTA, another example of a tool built into Windows that can be used and weaponized against you. You should probably block it in most cases, but if you can't block it, you should ring fence it. So ThreatLocker will scan your environment with 170 checks and will tell you, hey, you're not blocking MSHTA. We recommend you either block it, and we'll give you a policy that you can save. It takes a few minutes to deploy, or restrict it. So maybe you can't block it, but we'll say, you know what, I'm going to stop it going out to the internet. I'm going to stop it making changes to my registry. I'm going to stop it talking to applications like PowerShell. This way you can still use it if you need to, but it's not going to cause you any damage. We're going to do things like disable Microsoft Office macros. And here's a really cool one: admin tool lockdown in the case of a risk state detected. 2 years ago, the average ransomware attack took anywhere from 2 days to 3 weeks after somebody gained initial access. So if a user opens an email, gives someone initial access, they'll move around your network, they'll figure out what data you have, and then within 2 weeks, they start causing impact. So they'll extract files, they'll start encrypting files, and they'll normally do that over the weekend. Just 2 months ago, we saw an attack with ransomware within 7 minutes of gaining access to the server. Now, bear in mind, they gained access as an admin. RDP was open, or a VPN was left open through a vulnerability. They connected through RDP and they were able to gain access. But within 7 minutes, they were trying to exfil data from the organization. So one of the things that's really, really important is extending the time your SOC have to respond to indicators of compromise. The way an EDR works is it looks for indicators of compromise. An indicator of compromise might be new admin account created. It might be someone ran a PowerShell script. It might be someone enumerated privileges. So in here, as a perfect example, we're actually recommending that you block admin tools in the event of an increased risk state. So we've got some suggested policies here, and I'm going to create these 2 policies. So the first one is block admin tools. And basically what this policy does, it's an allow listing policy that basically says no admin tools can run on the machine. I've called it triggered, and the policy is not active by default. So all of the admin tools, I put registry editor, PowerShell, PS exec, command prompts, and I've set the status to deny. And I'm going to set it to secured mode as well. So even if the machine's in learning mode, this is still going to take effect. I'm going to set it to kill running processes. So I'm going to download this policy right now. And then I'm going to download a second policy that says, hey, I want to activate that policy if my system is compromised. So basically, I've just used a built-in ThreatLocker. I could use various different triggers. I can pretty much use any trigger I want. Event log IDs, you could say if there's 200 invalid logins, and block admin tools, or if someone RDPs, or someone runs Windows Defender detects malware, you can do all of these things. But in this case, I've said if ThreatLocker's threat level reaches 200, create an alert and enable that application policy to block admin tools. So when I go into here, I'm going to put this policy into enforcement mode. If I'm not sure if it's going to create a false alert, I can literally say enforce this policy beginning on this date, and then we'll be able to see the alerts for 2 weeks, and we'll be able to modify them. But in this case, I'll put it into enforcement mode. Okay, and now I'm going to show you just a quick example. So I'm going to open up some admin tools. We don't block these tools all the time because various different applications run them. I'm going to open command prompt. I'll open registry editor. And I'm going to just do something that will really upset the SOC. So typically, enumerating privileges is going to trigger an alert. So when I do this, that policy should trigger automatically. And all of the admin tools. Oh, I did this wrong. So basically, this is enumerating privileges. Now what's happened is that policy's triggered. All of my admin tools are immediately closed. An alert has been sent to the ThreatLocker threat center. And this is really, really important because what you've done now is you haven't taken down the server. You haven't stopped the user working. You haven't caused any major problems. If there's an IT guy trying to enumerate privileges, then he probably should have told the SOC beforehand and put a maintenance period in place. Really, really simple. Just block the admin tools, giving the SOC loads more time. So these are the things you can be doing. But when you think about security, don't think about, can I add more detection? Think about, how can I really harden the system without upsetting the user? And with ThreatLocker, that's really easy. You deploy, you learn. We'll tell you what websites are running. We can block malicious websites. We can block adult sites or gambling sites. We can block certain project management sites to stop shadow IT. We can show you what software is running. We can categorize it. We can block it. We can allow it. And we can even allow things like self-approval or ring fence by default. We can give you a full EDR that automatically responds and does things like stop people copying too much to a USB drive. It's not always black and white security. You can't just say, well, we're blocking USB drives. Maybe I want to allow USB drives, but I'm worried about data exfiltration. So if someone copies more than 50 files, I'm going to automatically block those USB drives. So we can do all sorts of detail like that, which will really allow our users to do what they need, but also keep the company secure. The same with web browsers. If someone starts uploading things to Dropbox, maybe you allow them to upload 5 files, but if they upload 50 files, we're going to automatically say, no, the browser is no longer able to access our protected files. To find out more about how ThreatLocker can help you really get control of cybersecurity, implement a zero trust architecture without upsetting your users in hours and days, not months and years, just reach out to us and book a demo. Thank you very much for your time.
Join us for 3 days in Orlando, Florida in March 2026 for an event designed to equip IT professionals like you with the tools, knowledge, and strategies to navigate the ever-changing cybersecurity landscape. Secure your spot and register to join us for 3 days of immersive learning, collaboration, and skill building with hands-on hacking labs and much more. Network with peers from around the globe. Share experiences and learn from real-world case studies, all aimed at enhancing your capabilities as an IT professional. Elevate your experience at the after party. Registration is now open. Register now for Zero Trust World 2026 and take the first step towards a more secure tomorrow.